Hello, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Katie Fairbank, and I have the pleasure of being the moderator for today's webinar. I know we have a bunch of folks dialing in from all over the world, so please would love to hear in the chat where you're coming from, how your day's going. I'll even take a vent or a complaint if you want. It's open, it's an open forum here. We just want to have a little fun. We are super excited. Ooh, look at so many different places. This is fun. We are so excited to have a discussion today about AI and AI literacy and all the things that you all need to know. I know this has been a really hot topic for a lot of folks, so we're so excited you're here. A couple quick housekeeping things before we dive in. The first thing is that the Q&A box is going to be open the whole time, so go ahead and drop your questions in as they come. We'll get to as many as we can in the last 15 minutes or so, and don't worry if there is a work emergency that pops up. We're recording, we got you covered. We will send out that recording in the follow-up. So to go ahead and kick things off, I am going to share my screen here. All right. Wanted to give just a little bit of context about what's bringing us all here together today. So, Google Slides loves me. There we go. For those of you that are wondering, why is CodeSignal hosting a webinar with super smart people about AI? Great question. For those of you that are less familiar with us at CodeSignal, we are a skills platform. So we help organizations discover and develop skills through simulation-based technology. So we do that with pre-hire assessments, and we do that with practice-based learning. We figure if you are showing your skills in any way, whether that's to get a job or whether that's to learn more, the best way to do it is by simulating what happens on the job. And there's been one particular topic that's been surging on our platform as we look at thousands and thousands of skills, and it will be a surprise to no one that that topic is AI literacy. And it all makes sense, right? So we know from studies that organizations with a mature AI literacy and AI upskilling program have have twice as much ROI or twice as likely to report ROI on their AI investments as those that don't have any sort of upskilling program. And those of you today may be saying, cool, 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 but we're not mature yet. That's okay. We're not here to discuss whether or not you should have AI literacy. We're here to help you figure out how you can do this responsibly and how you can do it quickly as well. So, our panelists today are all huge proponents of AI and AI literacy and doing everything the responsible way. And in fact, they all have something in common. They're all part of a group called the Human Centric AI Council. This is a group of practitioners and advisors that was put together by Kyle Lagunas of Kyle and Co. For those of you that are familiar with Kyle, you know he's awesome and he knows the best people. So we're really excited to have a couple of these folks on the line today. Now, this Human Centric AI Council has a number of different work streams. They've come together to put together resources specifically for HR professionals around what they should be thinking about when it comes to AI and AI adoption, AI governance, AI literacy, all of these important things. And they've put together a ton of different resources on the Human Centric AI Council website. We at CodeSignal really believe in the work that they're doing, and so we are proud underwriters of this program. And in fact, we got to partner with the team on a really fun initiative. We took all of the materials they put together for their AI literacy and AI fluency track, and we built a free course around that. So there's a QR code here. This will get you access to the course, and you can use it for free. You have unlimited access for free for 3 months, which should be plenty of time to finish the course. I can tell you, I have done it myself, and it's very fun. It's not boring. You have some lessons, you learn a little bit, and then you spend most of your time practicing your skills, which is awesome. So again, encourage you to check that out if you want to take this to the next level. Don't worry if your phone's not handy. Maybe you have a healthier relationship with technology than I do, and your phone isn't at arm's length at all times. We will be sending out this link in the chat as well as in a follow-up email after the webinar. So you will have many chances to get access to this course. So with that, I want to go ahead and kick things off. I know Dustin's still joining us here. We have some technical difficulties, which, you know, that always seems to happen. Murphy's Law. But Susan, would love to kick things off with you first, actually. From your perspective, what does it mean to be good at working with AI? And how'd you arrive at that definition?
Sure. So, hi, Katie. Can you hear me? Hi, Tara.
Yes,
Nice
you're
to
all
see you
good.
both. Okay,
Yeah.
great. And just to introduce myself, hi, everyone. My name is Susan Jackson, and I'm a talent, technology, and transformation leader. And I most recently worked at Estee Lauder Companies, and I am just passionate about all things AI and the future of work and how things are changing. And so to answer your question, what does it mean to be good at working with AI? I think it's really around understanding what tool to use based on your need. And so um, you can't just use a general purpose AI solution for all of your needs. General purpose tools have broad capabilities. They provide you fast answers, but they may not dig deep as enough as you need. And so I think it's really important to use AI software that's built for your need. Because those types of software, so if you think about legal specific software, finance specific software assessments, et cetera, they have a deep level of knowledge of your craft. And I also think being good means to being able to check multiple AI platforms to compare the output. You can't always just rely on what AI is telling you. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And I know it's a conversation that we've had quite a bit with folks. We've been at a number of events this spring, and they're all like, well, when should I be using just a general chat GPT versus when should I be leaning into a more specific AI solution? I think that's a great point, is being good at AI means discerning how you should be specific in the right context and where you should be going for your information. Tara or Dustin, welcome. Hi, thank you. Thank you for fighting through the tech challenges. Do you two have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I can just add that I think I agree with everything Susan said, but I also would add that I think AI is not going to be the solution for everything. And I think like our general foundational application of technology still stands, right? If you force fit a technology solution onto a broken process, you're not going to get the outcomes that you want. And AI is no different. So I think being good at it is making sure that you still are anchored to those principles around being thoughtful with your tech stack and how you are deploying technology against a process.
Yeah, yeah, great point. Dustin, anything on your end too?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add is I think there's a need for the first time in my career for recruiters to pay really, really close attention to a lot of the compliance implications of what we're doing here. And I think it requires a mental model shift. It's not to say recruiters aren't aware of compliance requirements, but the attention to detail is required in a new way as we give people more superpowers and more ability to do things beyond what I think the traditional tech stack made possible. So I think I completely agree with Susan and Tara's points. AI is not the solution for everything, and I think it's also important that we retain control over what should remain human at heart, what should be, even if it's not the most efficient way to manage a supply chain or the trade-offs exist. There are parts of this where the human relationship is still really, really critical.
Yeah, feel a little bit like we're living sci-fi movies from the past, not just because of the technology, but because of the discourse around what does it mean to be human? What should humans be doing? What is our purpose here? It's true. There's so many things that humans must be doing and humans should continue to do and important things that need that personal touch. I'm going to take a quick step back before our next question now that we have all of our panelists on the line here. I want to make sure I introduce all of you. Susan, thanks for introducing yourself a little bit. And I see that Dustin already has some friends in the chat, which is great. So fun. But Tara Torres is on the line here. Tara is a talent strategy, transformation, and responsible AI leader with more than 25 years of experience helping organizations navigate the intersection of people, technology, and business transformation. Dustin Kahn is here as well. He's the Senior Director of Strategy and Operations for Cisco's Join and Connect talent acquisition organization. Dustin's teams drive strategy, planning, recruiting operations, technology, process transformation, hiring compliance, and AI innovation. Oh, I'm tired. You guys have a lot.
Me too. Me too.
I could use a nap after just reading that. And then Susan Jackson is here as well. I know she introduced herself a little bit, but she's a talent technology and transformation leader with over 15 years of experience leading enterprise-wide initiatives across Fortune 500 and global organizations. So thank you all for being here today. And thank you for all of the work you're doing with the Human Centric AI Council as well. So, with that last piece of housekeeping taken care of, let's go ahead and jump to our next question. Tara, you can go ahead and answer this one first. What's something that you understand now about working with these tools that took you a little while to figure out?
Um, I mean, there's a lot of lessons learned, right? I mean, AI is evolving so quickly, and I think those of us that have been on the forefront of deploying it in our organizations realize really quickly that there's not like a playbook for how this is going to work. And so it does require a lot of trial and error. And I think, um, again, I go back to like those frameworks around tech deployment are remain. Pilots are helpful, testing, learning, evaluating, iteration, become even more important in the world of AI. And I think I'll just piggyback on to like what Dustin shared a minute ago in terms of like the attention to detail, whether you're a recruiter or someone else that's involved in the hiring process. A lot of organizations are running AI in a decentralized manner and just giving everyone access to every tool that's available. And so because the AI is so smart and it can help you do things that you wouldn't normally have the technical acumen to do, you can very quickly find yourself doing something that is putting the company at risk. So I think all of those things combined were like key lessons learned in terms of how you deploy AI responsibly. And then just making sure that it's really evident where the human is still in the loop, right? Obviously there are a lot of requirements that need to be met from a legal and compliance standpoint, but more importantly, as a company, as you're doing that, making sure that you're aware where AI is being used, how it's being used, and that at a minimum, there's human oversight and the decision making. But at the very, and then ideally there's still humans that are, actually making the decisions.
Yeah, yeah. One of my favorite pieces that the Human Centric AI Council actually put together, plug for you all, is a risk framework. And you all should take a look at that on the site. It's super helpful, super informative, especially as we see more laws coming to market with different compliance standards across states and localities. So love that one. Dustin, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think cognitive agility on this topic is the thing that surprised me the most. I've seen, especially over the last year, excitement arise over one particular model or tool set or thingy that's out there, and people lean in really hard to that. And I think that that's great, and you can squeeze a lot of value out of one specific tool. But what I'm finding is that there is also value in considering things that are tool agnostic a little bit, which is pretty different for recruiting technology stacks and thinking through how do we orchestrate? How do we architect ways of interacting and ways of asking questions, whether that's thoughtful prompt engineering or other tool sets that are out there. And how do you do that in a way that is going to be able to transition from hot model to hot model, if that makes sense, to find things that are going to give you the best results. There's a lot of risk that goes with that too. Tara rightly pointed out the compliance side of this. And I watch parts of our business that are delivering software for our customers and for our partners, and I look at our partner ecosystem and how we're using AI to identify trends in challenges that our customers are having, and all of that is really complicated. All of that is really, really important. As recruiting professionals and HR professionals, I actually think we have a bigger target on us because we're talking about whether or not people get jobs and how people get paid and how people see their ability to impact and be considered for places where they can contribute. And so it's kind of scary as you're incorporating different models into your experimentation, but I also think it's one of the most exciting things I've experienced in my career in HR.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Like if I could just, what you just shared, Dustin, like triggered another thought for me. Because these models are evolving so quickly, right? in a traditional HR technology sense, you put a solution in place in your tech stack, you train people on how to use it, and they're introducing what I would consider to be micro improvements to the tool, but not dramatically changing fundamentally how the tool works. These models from an AI perspective are evolving so quickly that if you deploy an AI solution on a given model, 3 or 6 months down the road, that model is obsolete. And likely the output and results that model was producing within your process might no longer be valid. So unlike an HR tech system where you can kind of turn it on, train people, and kind of lightly monitor it over time, maybe 6, even 12 months go by before you sort of retro, with AI, you really have to be much more mindful and on top of that oversight and continually keeping those models up to date with the latest and greatest.
Yeah, I love that. My my manager actually put together this really cool engine using an AI tool. And I was like, I want to do something similar. Can you walk me through how you did that? And we get on a Zoom to go through it. She's like, well, I did this. And it was a totally different experience. It was a matter of weeks between what she did and when we were getting together. And everything's just changing so fast. So it is about the experience. It's about being engaged and being dynamic. Susan, did you have anything to add there?
I just want to say that I agree with Dustin and I agree with Tara. And I think, you have to be careful because, like Tara was saying, these models are moving so fast. And it's so important to make sure that human is in the loop. There always needs to be guardrails in place and, just making sure you're keeping up with your audits and you're having the right groups at the table to make sure that, your company is staying in compliance. And I just think that that's so important. So that's all
Yeah.
I have to add.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like Dustin's shirt. Human at heart, AI by design.
Such a
Connected
perfect shirt for today's conversation, for sure.
Might have
Perfect
done that
workout
on purpose. I can't confirm.
outfit. Dustin, with that, I'll ask you our next question first. Can you tell me your favorite way that you're using AI?
Oh gosh, where to start? So I'd love to give you like practical applications about parts of the recruiting life cycle where that's coming into play, and there's a lot of cool stuff that we're learning about there. For me, I have taken to using AI for my own work as kind of my personal Big Four consultant, and for me, I kind of made the journey that probably a lot of us have from thinking of prompting an agentic AI solution like a glorified Google search, to asking it for answers to things, and there's value in both of those. But what I've started doing is pivoting to asking it to provide frameworks for me to think and for me to structure how I'm going to make a decision, not to make the call, not even necessarily to have all of the context for what it's going to require for me to make that decision, because we do deal with so much confidential information and personally identifiable information, and it's touchy. So for me, one of the more exciting things has been making it make me a bigger thinker. And that's not to say that we won't still continue to, write big statements of work with the Accentures and the Deloittes of the world. We will, I'm sure. But to have that in my back pocket and to be able to use that to synthesize my own thought patterns has become a superpower for me. So selfishly, I kind of like how I show up when it's helped me look around corners.
I agree, Dustin. I use AI in that same capacity, and I think that's my favorite way to use it. It's my own thought partner, off to the side. So whenever I'm working on a presentation or putting a change management plan together or whatever it is, it helps me find the gaps if there are any gaps, and that's really my favorite way. And it really something that I do before I present any material to a larger audience.
But
It's
you do have to
very
be
effective.
prepared when you correct it, and it says you're absolutely right with an exclamation point. Like there are still some checks there that remind you that, oh yeah, I still actually have to put some cycles into this.
Yeah. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, it's been a massive unlock for me personally, and I've used it in the same ways that Dustin and Susan have articulated. I've also really challenged myself and, people that that work for me to really think in the concept of building agents as an extension of yourself, right? And taking a little bit of time to put together the description of an agent and give the tooling context can be a massive unlock for you in things that you need to do. And then using like N8N or Claude Code to build further automations using that. So, if you're just at the point where you're just prompting, like Google, maybe transitioning to, more question based, you're where a lot of people are. And so that's a great start. But, pushing yourself a little bit further, there's a lot more you can get out of it with pretty limited effort up front.
Absolutely. I think it's easy to forget that we have to onboard agents. We have to get them ramped on what we do. We have to treat them like we always joke it's our interns, These are our interns, and we need to make sure that they're equipped with the context and the information. And I love the example of using AI as a thought partner. I think we hear a lot about AI can write this for you. AI, you can offload this repetitive task to AI, but it's easy to forget that AI can help us formulate our own thoughts and help us be better humans, to the point earlier, by using that technology to check our thinking, to reframe our thinking, and all that good stuff. Tara, would you mind giving me an example of a lesson learned with AI? What have you tried that hasn't worked out as intended, and what went wrong?
Yeah. Um, I guess I would say that, we tried a lot of different things in my time at Coinbase. And, you know, I consider everything a learning and not necessarily something going wrong, but because again, we were so far out in front, there was, not necessarily a roadmap or a playbook to sort of see how things were going to transpire. So without sharing, specific details, I think, ultimately, dipping your toe into the pond, figuring out what works, what doesn't work. In particular, where you're introducing AI into a place where it was a very human um, forward or human centric part of the process. It's a delicate balance and making sure that AI is complementing it in the right way, and that the human is still in the loop in the place that it makes sense. And I think that's the experimenting part. Um, one of the things that we learned in terms of deploying AI, like in the upper funnel or the phone screen part of the process, is that, like, not every candidate responds in the same way to utilizing AI in the process. This is really not a novel concept either. I mean, I encountered similar situations deploying video interviewing many years ago, right? So, but there's going to be a certain candidate profile, think security professionals as an example, or maybe even in some cases engineers, where they're just like suspect of engaging with some of these tools. And so organizationally, you have to think about balancing, the scalability that you want these tools to bring you with still being able to attract and engage with the best candidates. And so I guess I would say, to summarize, that our lessons learned would really be um, taking the time to drill down into the results to see where specifically things are being successful and where they're not, and making sure, just like you would with anything else, that you're making accommodations in the process where it makes sense and where it counts, in particular for, key talent that you need to engage.
Yeah, yeah, great point. Quick follow-up. Um, were you surprised at all by candidates engaging with AI? It sounds like there were some that required accommodations, but overall adoption, were there any surprises or takeaways there?
I was honestly really curious, maybe like not exactly sure what we were going to see. And I would say overall, while there were pockets of places where we didn't have strong engagement from candidates, largely engagement was high, but also feedback, right? So we really made sure that we had feedback from the candidate point of view that gave us signal that the experience wasn't perfect, but, was effective, and, we could continue to improve it.
Love that. Susan, anything that you'd share that is a lesson learned?
I think for me, it's just ensuring that you're not, putting AI on a broken process, and a lot of times we think by implementing AI, it's going to fix, all the problems that you're having. And a lot of times what you need to do is you need to look at the end-to-end process and see, where would AI fit and what else do we need to change in order to make this process successful. So I think that's the number one. But even after you implement AI, making sure that the people involved, the humans in the loop, are following the new process, and for me, that's been challenging. So making sure that from a change management side and from a culture side, the organization is ready, but us in our roles, we need to make sure that that organization is ready by having the proper change management plan in place. And to a lot of times, when people are told about a change, they're told about it too late. So just making sure you're bringing the team along throughout the process and not just kind of throwing, so to speak, a new solution on top of them with AI. And I think for me, that's been the biggest thing is just making sure that the change management's involved, but the process is also being followed.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
that's such a good point. Like to give AI a fighting chance, just like any other HR tech stack deployment, you've got to put it on a standard process to get the optimal output. And then that enablement piece is super key, right? I think, less about like buttons to click, and orders of steps and more about how you really leverage this in the process end to end.
Susan, you brought up putting good technology over broken process, and I was like, meet the new thing, same as the old thing. Like that's
Mhm.
not new. That has always been true as we think about the technology solutions that we're applying to some of this stuff. It's just amplified and accelerated right now at a pace that I've never experienced before. And I completely agree with those assertions that you guys are making. I think the other lesson that I've learned is to pick your horses purposefully. I think in the earliest days of AI experimentation, which it's funny to say that because it still feels like we're there a little bit, but we were poking buttons to experiment. We didn't know what to do. We were just trying things out and seeing how it worked. And I've kind of evolved my point of view to place bets in spots where I think there's going to be measurable impact. And so we look at things that are kind of controversial, like candidate list stack ranking. Like, wow, okay, that's not a validated assessment. I don't really know how to defend it 100% of the time. Some of the solutions out there are a little black boxy, so it's kind of tough. Do I really want to put my energy into figuring that out? Or are there other parts of intake and sourcing and our own internal communications and process movement and interview scheduling and like all kinds of things where it's like, hey, that's a little less scary as we look at the EU AI Act in New York City 144 in Connecticut and like this emerging patchwork of confusion that exists out there. And I'm not to say you shouldn't stack rank or any of that. I think every organization needs to make their own decisions, but it becomes ever important to prioritize because we cannot do it all. And apologies, Katie, if I'm jumping ahead to the Q&A that's in here, but I see this
Please
question from
do.
Lance. And the second half of the question around how can you cut through the noise of candidates who all start to sound the same? Like that's a perfect example of a place where actually AI can speed up some parts of that process. But the reality is the human component is still going to have to interact and assess for, who's going to be the best fit for the roles that we have. And the tools can't do that for you. Or at least I would caution you against trusting them all to, because there's just too many opportunities to go sideways on it. So I think picking the right bets and focusing in the places where your energy is going to be measurable in terms of impact and not just a performative AI tap dance. Like, I think that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I worked with someone who talked a lot about peanut buttering. And when you peanut butter, you spread everything too thin, and there's no way to really see what the outcome is. And so I love that idea to pick places, focus there, run those pilots, and then expand. And I'll say to Lance's question too, I think technology can be really good at helping you focus in the right places. The humans are still going to need to interact with the humans, but the AI can kind of help you get to more of the human aspect of them. I know a lot of folks are using AI to evaluate more candidates than they could previously, and that's great. Gives everybody a chance to speak to where they're from as opposed to a resume that maybe looks like someone else's because that was on ChatGPT too. But yeah, I love that. Also, Lance is a friend. Hi, Lance. Thanks for joining. Awesome. So, Susan, where do you go when you're trying to stay ahead of AI and trends? Who are you learning from?
there's so many good groups out there that have information. I think for me, one of the websites that I go to on a regular basis is the IAPP, and that's a website that has a lot of information regarding the latest in privacy laws, governance, and cybersecurity. And I feel like every day I'm getting a new email about, a change in legal regulation, but also, and just to plug the Human Centric AI Council, we have a wealth of information. We have educational courses, as you mentioned, Katie. We have the framework, Tara, that you put together that's interactive. We have change management ebooks, but there's lots of different areas and places to go. But I think for me, that IAPP website is top of mind, and that's typically where I go first. I'm very passionate about the laws and regulations. It might not be as glamorous as some of the other parts of AI, but I really think that that's for me where I go first to find out what's going on and what do I need to be careful of and thoughtful of when I'm thinking about AI.
Yeah, super helpful to get the gotchas before you start building something out and build with that in mind. Tara, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Susan said. Being a part of the Human Centric AI Council has been like a fantastic experience and expanded my own learning in addition to the contributions that, we all made together. I'll do a plug for Bob Pulver's Elevate Your AIQ podcast because I think that's another really strong resource, and Bob's on the council with us to just hear some of the latest insights and information. But I think the channels are relatively the same, right? I mean, um, it's career crossroads and all these different places where AI is continuing to be a focal point and just getting different perspectives. Um, every organization has a different level of risk tolerance. And so it's really important that you expand your horizons and thinking about not what other people are doing that should help inform your approach, but also taking into account, how that translates within your respective organization from a risk tolerance standpoint. So,
Yeah, Tara, I think that's a really good point. All organizations are different, and it's not a one size fits all.
Dustin, you want to share your thoughts?
So I don't know if paradox is the right word for this, but it's a little paradoxical. On one hand, this is the scariest moment in my career because there is no playbook, there is no established end-to-end solution that we can just follow. We can't do it. Uh, Organizations like the HCAIC are pulling things together, and we're learning a lot, and we're trying to help organizations and practitioners jumpstart their journey here a little bit, but it's not done. And so that's a little intimidating, but it's also exciting because it means nobody's done this before us. So we're as qualified as anybody else to dive in and really start getting going. And what I will say is beyond just the council, which is great. Everybody should go look at our website, go do that. Beyond that, I thrive when I connect with my peers. And so that's people like Susan and Tara. But broadly, what I would suggest to anybody is be bold, lean in, reach out, brainstorm together, figure it out together. And you'll be shocked at how fast you can do something that's pretty transformational. But I, for one, could not do it without a community of peers around me to help check me when I'm insane, and to pump me up when I'm in the right direction and to figure some of this stuff out together.
Another case of helpful humans.
Yeah,
AI can't
look,
do it all.
human by heart, it's all of it.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Thank you for that. So as we think ahead in the next 2, 3 years, which is hard to predict to Tara's point earlier, what do you think a truly AI fluent HR team will look like? Let's see. Dustin, do you want to answer this one first?
Yeah. So I think, and I feel this keenly, but I think it'll be an organization where across the org, people have the ability to look at a business problem and a suggested solution and intuitively know, yeah, that's a thing I should lean into, or gosh, I should probably talk to some other people on my team. And there's a compliance aspect to that. There's a PR aspect that you got to be paying attention to. But one of the things that I think is different is we as enablement and operations support functions historically have prototyped a lot of these thoughts, and we've gotten feedback from delivery leaders and recruiters and coordinators and all of that. But we're kind of trying to serve it up as baked as we possibly can in most cases, and that'll continue. We got to be force multipliers, but there is a level of ownership that is going to be required from the newest, greenest coordinator scheduling interviews to senior executives that are managing the strategy. We have to be fluent. We have to be aware of the context here. And that doesn't mean that every single recruiter needs to be an expert in every regulatory requirement or every customer obligation or whatever. That's not realistic. But we have to get to a place where our critical thinking is evolved sufficiently that there's nobody in the org that doesn't understand how to make these decisions. And that feels different to me.
Yeah. Well, and thinking about ownership too, a lot of organizations that we've been talking to, there's kind of this tug of war on who gets to own AI initiatives, who gets to dictate what you're doing. Is it legal because there's such a compliance standpoint? Is it IT because it's technology, or is it HR because you are the domain experts for your field? How have you all managed that dynamic? Tara, I don't know if you have any thoughts there.
Different in every organization, right? I mean, in some organizations, legal is the end all be all. And if they say no, it's not happening, right? In other cases, legal serves as a strategic advisor and, can give you things to consider from a risk perspective, what position they might take to be able to defend a decision legally. But they don't get to make the call. So, I mean, it's really about understanding the dynamics of your organization and how decision making is done. I think that's where some of the tools that we've put together with our toolkit can be really beneficial in building those partnerships with those stakeholders, because it's going to give you an opportunity to really think through all the different potential breakpoints that could happen when implementing AI into a process and proactively thinking through what are the risks associated with that, and then how am I going to mitigate those? And, regardless of the role that your legal and compliance partners play in your organization, just imagine showing up in a way with them where you can, already have those things thought through. It might not be fully comprehensive. I'm sure their legal expertise would add some things to it, but it just really demonstrates, the power that HR can have in influencing the right outcomes for the business by sort of demystifying and, proactively addressing how some of those risks would get mitigated.
So I think that's really important. I also think this is where understanding the value you're trying to drive becomes important because what I've found is very rarely is there such a thing as a zero risk operating environment. We're going to make choices. There are going to be trade-offs. But if you go into that conversation, regardless of whether it's HR, the business, legal, whoever's making the final call, and I agree that that fluctuates depending on the topic and the company and all kinds of things. But if you go into it with, hey, this is a cute idea that we think might be nifty, if there's risk associated with that, that is really hard to hold water. But if you go into it and say, hey, look, we're going to see an X percentage increase in X, Y, Z, whatever the thing is. And so we need to factor that in to the level of risk we're willing to accept as a part of this process. I personally believe that in an innovative moment like this, if we don't take any risks, we're not really pushing very hard. And so we've got to learn, we've got to try it, but we also need to understand the value. And the second thing that I would add to that we've had success with is approaching our partners in legal and data protection and security with a desire to co-create, certainly, but also with a willingness to create operational controls and mechanisms that can help mitigate some of the risk. It's never going to be perfect, but I do think over time, as we get into litigation and we get into audits, good faith efforts are going to matter. And particularly since we're all inventing this as we go, anywhere we can point to, here was the value, here's the risk that we assessed, here's what we did to try and mitigate it. It's the best that we can do. I actually think that can be pretty strong.
I
Not
agree
agree
with
more.
I agree. I agree, Dustin, and I agree,
Yeah.
Tara, with what both of you are saying. I think it depends on the culture of the organization in regards to who owns what. I think it should be a joint partnership. I do think sometimes HR hesitates because they don't feel that they're technical enough sometimes to be part of these AI conversations, which is where some of the material that was put together, that's part of the council is really helpful. But I think what HR has to understand is that the technical part of AI is only one small component of everything that's needed to make an AI project successful. Typically, right, HR leaders, they bring a lot to the table. They understand the people part of the company. They do understand processes or behavior, et cetera. And I think in order to successfully implement an AI solution, those are the questions that need to be asked, not just the technical questions, but the business questions. And so I just, hoping that the material that we're putting together will equip HR enough so that they'll feel that they have a seat at the table.
Yeah. To your point earlier, Susan, technology is just part of the solution for a problem. You can't stick the technology on a broken process. You all know the process. You can get the technology. You have these resources to help you with that shared language and what you need to know. And that's very important. All right, last question before we go to open Q&A here. I know we have some that's come through the chat in the Q&A box. So let's say there's one person on the line here that's just looking to get started and grow their maturity. What's the number one place you would tell them to start? Susan, do you want to go first? Oh, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I think the best place to start as far as just learning it within your organization is just figuring out how to use AI for your own personal use. Just making sure that, you as a leader are experimenting and playing around, not just with the general purpose tools, but building your own agents and just figuring out how it works for you. And I also think by sharing that information with your colleagues and your peers and having opportunity every week with your team to share knowledge that you're learning. And I think peer-to-peer learning is always more successful than listening to a webinar or, taking a structured training course, but just hearing how your peers are learning and using different agents and things is always more helpful and more beneficial. So.
Except for this webinar, of course. This is the ultimate webinar that's better than any one-to-one interaction. I kid. It's all very
I
important.
agree.
Tara, what about you?
I've said this a couple times, so forgive me for being a broken record, but I really, in addition to what Susan mentioned, which I think is really a fantastic place to start, but secondarily, it's like just continuing to anchor back to what you always know to be true when you're doing any technology deployment. And the number one thing that you're focused on is not chasing the new shiny toy, but making sure that you have a legitimate, well-defined business problem that needs to be solved, and you have a clear use case for where AI could really help address that. And so I think right now there's so much excitement in some organizations, pressure, like this race that we're all in to get, the best AI solutions and deployed and like fully automate everything that we do. And when you're in that state, it's easy to um kind of cut corners even unconsciously. And so I think it's really important that you just anchor back to those like old school principles around having a defined problem and knowing that AI really is or isn't the right solution to fix it.
Yeah. Yeah. Great point. Dustin?
Poke buttons. This is not the kind of muscle that's going to be developed academically or theoretically. There's a lot you can read, and that's good, and there's value, but you have to do it in order to get a sense for what the impact is going to be. And so you can do it with free models, you can pay for models, you can do whatever you want, but start chatting. And don't just ask it a question like it's a glorified Google search. Give it some context. Tell it it's a Big Four consultant that you've contracted to help you with a specific business problem set, and here's some steps that you want to go through to think about your work. Ask AI to generate a body of garbage resumes for you based on some skill sets and job descriptions so you can test it on non-real candidate stuff in a safe space. And don't be afraid to break things. I think one thing that has been interesting to me is applying some components of scientific method to how we do this. if you experiment, sometimes that experiment is going to fail, and that can teach you as much as something that's successful, sometimes even more. So, I would say if you're waiting for somebody to tell you what this feels like, you're already behind. And the good news is you can fix that today. You can fix it right now. Well, not right now because we're talking and we're awesome, but you can do it at the top of the hour. That'll be great. And I think you've got to roll up your sleeves. And I don't care if you're a VP, SVP, EVP, wherever you are in the organization, you have to get conversant at this. You have to know what it feels like because not only are you going to need to support the people in your teams that are trying things, your peers, your leaders, your stakeholders are going to ask you what you're doing about it. And if you haven't actually gotten in and worked through some of these solutions, you're going to find that your point of view is pretty limited. So if you are waiting, stop that and lean into it. Just start having some conversations and see where you can take it. Don't
Yeah.
put candidate real data into a random LLM, or we'll bury you in thoughts and prayers.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Let's go ahead and get to some of the questions that came in through the chat. As a reminder, you can add your questions here. We have quite a bit of time to answer them. So our first question comes from Natalie. She's talking a little bit about the environmental impact of AI, asking, has anyone on your team brought this to your attention and how do you address it? Thoughts? Dustin, I see you nodding.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. Like you go from these ideas that seem pretty cool to understanding the economy of it. And part of that is tokenomics in terms of just overall cost, but part of it is the very real environmental impact if we're wasting energy, literally wasting energy in many of these cases. And so I think it is worth um, doing some thoughts and some systems design outside of the bots to some degree to kind of figure out what it is that you want to do. Because to our point earlier, and I think what I tried to be clever with was meet the new thing, same as the old thing. The business problems we have are not new. They're not different. Specifically in recruiting, the supply chain is the supply chain. And so there are core fundamental components to that, that thoughtful orchestration on a whiteboard can get you started on some things with occasional prompts that are going to be in there. But the reality is, it's actually not us brainstorming and trying to come up with ideas and viable solutions that is going to, heat up the data centers. It's when you apply these solutions at scale and you're asking tens of thousands potentially of hiring leaders or hundreds of thousands of interviewers or millions of candidates to interact with some of this that it becomes a real thing. So I don't got a silver bullet for it. I don't know what the end solution is, short of like put it all in space. That'll be great. But I do think being thoughtful is a step that we can control. And again, I think as you're thinking about the impact that you're going to have, it's not just what did it do to my time to fill or what did it do to my conversion ratios. Those are important metrics, but also how will we scale this? How will we pay for this? What is our consideration and our point of view on what it means from an environmental impact perspective? There's no way to do this without burning some energy somewhere. It's not possible, but we can be thoughtful about it. For those of us that are in really large organizations, usually we do actually have a point of view from a corporate perspective in terms of how we think about sustainability and environmental impact. I know that fluctuates and there's a huge spectrum there. But I think thoughtfulness is step number one if we're talking specifically about the environmental impact.
Love that. Such a thoughtful response and honestly the best a lot of us can do, right? It's the best we can do is be thoughtful and use it where it matters and not waste it where it doesn't. Tara, Susan, anything to add there?
I just agree with what Dustin said, and I think, as time goes on, it will be more and more important because we're hearing more about the environmental impacts and the data centers that are, being developed all over the place now, it seems like.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if this is too bold and it is unrelated to HR things in terms of what we do all day, but I would encourage people to get active in their communities, to talk to their regulators, to talk to their legislators, to have a point of view on what this is. Because I'm an HR dork. I don't know how to solve environmental challenges. I don't know how to optimize data center usage. Those are not my areas of expertise, but I got a voice and I can be loud and I can talk about what's important to me. I know that that's a bite at the apple, but I do think it adds up.
I love that.
Well
I
said.
don't think it's too bold. I think it's a good reminder that we all have a
Yeah.
voice and it matters. Awesome. Thank you. Um, Kate chimed in with a comment, but I think it brings up a good question. Kate's talking about how they've seen candidates who ask for AI help in getting their resumes to match a job description, and then all of the applicants look the exact same. What advice are you giving to candidates when it comes to using AI themselves in the hiring process?
I can start with that one. I
Yeah, that'd
mean,
be
I
great.
think the main thing with candidates is that you have to be transparent with them about where you're using AI in the process, how you expect them to utilize AI or to not utilize AI in the process. Um, and, create a process that gives an opportunity for people to be evaluated beyond a static piece of paper. And, I don't think anybody has perfectly solved for how these resumes are kind of coming across looking um, identical or very similar, but you should be thinking about how you get access to multiple data points that you are considering top of funnel. Whether that is a LinkedIn profile, other social media profiles, etc., that are going to give you a more holistic perspective on a candidate beyond just a resume. And I think it'll be interesting to see what the future of the resume is in light of AI, because I could definitely see there being an evolution in that space.
Yeah. The future of the resume is something we think and talk a lot about at CodeSignal.
Mhm.
I can tell you
You know
that.
what though? Is that new? I don't know. I feel like, and I've
No.
got a little bias having worked at a video interviewing company before. The resumes have been garbage forever, and people have been creative and able to fluff them and pad them and do all of that forever. And so I don't know. I think it's the rest of your selection process and the ways that you're going to compare candidate capabilities that becomes really important. And yeah, that doesn't help so much at the top of the funnel, but you can be smart about the types of screening questions that you present people with and be really, really purposeful from that perspective. But resumes have always been garbage. That's like there's data out there that is scientifically proven. They tell you a little bit. And side note, I would argue that the majority of our recruiters spend about 90 seconds max looking at a typical resume, move on to the next one, and start having a human conversation. So that's not going to go away. I think it has to continue, and it makes your down funnel processes that much more critical. So I just don't know that that's new.
Yeah.
I would
Yeah,
agree.
I agree. It's not new. It is important, as a candidate to be true to yourself, and it's so easy to use um, ChatGPT, Claude to create your resume, but you also have to make sure that what's in your resume is accurate and true. And it's just a data point, right? LinkedIn profiles, you're not going to go in and modify your LinkedIn profile for every job. So that's really where I think the truth is. And the other parts of the process, assessments are so valuable as well.
The
Yeah.
only other thing I'd add, and Terry, you talked about transparency, and Margie, I see your question in the chat about transparency as well. So one of the things that we've tried is in our how we hire page within our career site, we've actually got side-by-side comparisons of here are things that we think are good uses of AI from the candidate's perspective, and here are some things that are not really going to serve our purpose. And so part of the message is also we do still want your story. We do still want to know who you are. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's important to see where you went to school and where you've worked and what you've done, but I want to know who you are. So how can you use these tools to control the narrative on that front? Because the reality is you got three options. You can tell people don't use AI. Good luck with that. We're getting some tools that can maybe sort of tell you that occasionally sometimes they're stretching a bit, but good luck with that at scale. The second is you put your head in the sand and you say nothing. And that's a really dangerous path because candidates are clever. And if you give them no guidance or suggestions or guardrails or anything at all, we'll see what you get. The third option is you can be deliberate and you can put it out there and you can say, here's the expectations and what we're trying to do. And by the way, not to be scary, but we have processes in place. So if you're full of it and you're just using an LLM to answer all these questions, we're going to get you. Like it's not going to help you. So be thoughtful, be purposeful, and control your story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well
And
said, Dustin.
yes, very well said. Um, and Kate, I know you had some follow-ups too. Be happy to chat with you, have some thoughts on things that our other customers are doing there with the problem of like, well, resumes are exploding because everybody can apply to 100 jobs with ChatGPT in a matter of a few minutes. There's some definitely some solves there that can help you get the full picture of the candidate as well. Okay, question came in here from Keith. Keith says, if a company's decision maker determines the AI rollout hasn't been successful, how would you address the fact that maybe they didn't come in with the best definition of successful? Tara, any thoughts there?
Um, I think that because AI is still so new and evolving, um, you have a tendency to like think about it in a very traditional sense of scalability, efficiency, saves time, right? And in my experience, I think, I've seen AI become more of a quality play. And so I think if it comes back and you're not seeing the results that were expected, hopefully, the organization understands the experimental nature that AI is right now. And you can not only speak to what was not accomplished, but more importantly, why. Was it deployed on a broken process? Did you not have adoption? Did candidates not engage? Like, what was the result of why it didn't work that could lead you to how you might pivot from there? So I think it's less about this one particular thing didn't fail or didn't work right. It's like, here's what we learned, and here's now what we can do to adjust where we go from here, either changing what we want as outcomes, abandoning it altogether because we want this one particular outcome and we know this isn't going to happen, or adjusting something else within the process that in combination with the AI is going to get you what you want.
Great advice. Susan, Dustin, anything to add there?
I mean, I just agree. I think it's important to define those success metrics in the beginning. What are you looking to accomplish? Are you looking to save time in a particular item, reduce errors? Adoption is key depending on what you're implementing, and also our quality metrics. So I think it depends on what you're trying to accomplish, what you're trying to do, but also it's okay to make mistakes because that's how you learn, right? And all of this is so new. And so making those mistakes, especially if you're doing a pilot, making those mistakes small scale help you be a lot more successful if you're rolling out to the entire enterprise.
I also think it's a fundamental mindset shift. So I've spent my career doing big, monolithic, gnarly implementations that take 12 to 18 months and hopefully work for the next 5 to 7 years. And this is not that anymore. And so if we're trying to run everything through the same filter that has worked since time immemorial, I think it's a false equivalency. I think we have to reframe expectations that we're going to be more agile, we're going to be fast, we're going to try crazy things. Some of them are going to fail. And here's how we're going to learn from that. Here's how we're going to pivot. It's just dramatically different from the way that we have historically implemented and supported software in the HR function. And I think that's exciting. But it's also very, very new and very different. And candidly, some of our most executive leaders have a pretty big history of doing some of this work. And so if we're not doing the work to reframe our stakeholder expectations and to bring them along in the journey, you're going to have a struggle there. But if you do that, we're going to fail sometimes, and that's okay. We're going to move really fast, and that's exciting. It's also a little dizzying. And so if we're not factoring in for the change management and enablement factors here, or layers here that are going to help recruiters and HR practitioners be successful, we'll miss it. But it's a fundamental reframe of how we think about technology's ability to solve problems that we have in the human capital space.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. I know we're coming up on time here. I did promise everyone that we would provide the link to the course here again. So the QR code is here. It will go out in a follow-up email as well. If you enjoyed today's content, you can join us for our next webinar. The next one, we're going to be diving deeper into how you can use technology in this day and age and as part of your HR processes. So I know our team put the link to register for that one in the chat. Would love to see you there again. And I would love to give a huge thank you to our panelists. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and insights. I know I learned a ton, and thank you for all the work you're doing with the council as well. Hope to see you all again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, all.